I'm Jack, 28, living the Silicon Valley dream as a senior software engineer after graduating from MIT. 5 years ago, I cut my parents out of my life completely after they chose my sister's ballet recital over my college graduation. I built a new life, found success, and healed. Then my cousin's wedding invitation arrived, forcing me to face the family I'd left behind. I never expected that weekend would change everything. Let me know where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button to hear how I finally stood up for myself after years of being treated as second best to my sister. Growing up in suburban Boston, my childhood looked perfect on paper. My father Thomas taught history at Boston University, while my mother Diana was a respected literature professor at the same institution. Our home was filled with books, intellectual discussions, and high expectations. From an early age, I showed an aptitude for mathematics and science that made my academic parents proud. My report cards were always plastered with As, and I won the regional science fair 3 years in a row starting in 4th grade. When my sister Sophia was born 4 years after me, our family dynamic shifted subtly at first. She was a cute, energetic child who captivated everyone's attention. I didn't mind sharing the spotlight. I was the protective big brother who taught her how to tie her shoes and ride a bike. When Sophia was 5, my mother enrolled her in ballet classes at the local community center, thinking it would be a good way to channel her boundless energy. No one expected what happened next. Sophia's dance instructor pulled my parents aside after just 2 months of classes. "Your daughter has a rare natural talent," she said. "She moves with a grace and precision I rarely see in children twice her age." My parents were thrilled. Soon, Sophia was moved to advanced classes with older students, and her training schedule intensified. Initially, my parents maintained a balance, proudly attending both my academic competitions and Sophia's dance recitals. Dad would beam when I brought home perfect math scores, and Mom would help me with science projects late into the night. But as Sophia's ballet career began taking off, that balance gradually tilted. I remember the first major disappointment when I was 12. I had qualified for the State Mathematics Olympiad, an achievement my math teacher called exceptional. The competition fell on the same day as one of Sophia's regular recitals. "Your father will be at your competition," Mom promised. But on the morning of the event, Dad apologetically explained that Sophia was nervous about her solo, and she needed both parents there for support. "You'll be fine, Jack," he said, ruffling my hair. "You're always so self-sufficient." I won first place that day. The judge called it the most elegant solution he'd seen from a middle schooler. I stood on the podium alone, watching other kids being hugged by their parents. When I got home, my certificate was met with distracted congratulations, as my parents helped Sophia practice for her next performance. This pattern continued and intensified throughout middle school. My parents missed my debate team finals to attend Sophia's audition for a summer intensive program. They couldn't make my computer science showcase because it conflicted with Sophia's rehearsal. Each time, there was always a reason why her events took priority. Each time, I swallowed my disappointment and told myself it didn't matter. The person who filled this void was my grandfather Harold, my father's father. Grandpa Harold had been an engineer in his working days, and he recognized my potential early on. When my parents couldn't attend my events, Grandpa would show up, camera in hand, cheering louder than anyone else's parents. On my 14th birthday, when my parents gave me a hastily purchased gift card because they were busy preparing for Sophia's upcoming competition, Grandpa Harold arrived with a carefully wrapped package containing a slightly outdated but functional computer. "I know you've been interested in programming," he said. "Now you can learn on your own machine." That computer changed my life. I taught myself coding, staying up late into the night building simple games and programs. While my parents drove Sophia to prestigious dance workshops across the state, I was building my skills, driven by a mixture of passion and a desperate need to prove my worth. I loved my sister, and that was the complicated part. Sophia wasn't spoiled or entitled. She worked incredibly hard at her craft. She spent hours practicing until her feet blistered and her muscles ached. She never asked for the preferential treatment, and sometimes I could see the guilt in her eyes when she noticed my disappointment. We maintained a bond despite the imbalance, sharing late-night talks when both of us should have been sleeping. Still, I couldn't help but feel the sting of being the afterthought in my parents' attention economy. By high school, I had accepted my place in the family hierarchy. I poured my energy into academics and programming, building an impressive resume of achievements that required minimal parental involvement. I won coding competitions, developed small applications, and maintained a perfect GPA. I did it mostly alone, with Grandpa Harold as my main cheerleader and mentor. When my MIT acceptance letter arrived during my senior year of high school, I was ecstatic. Massachusetts Institute of Technology had been my dream school since I was 10 years old. I ran through the house with the letter clutched in my hand, finding my parents in the kitchen preparing dinner. "I got in," I announced, holding up the prestigious envelope. "Full scholarship to MIT." My mother looked up from chopping vegetables. "That's wonderful, honey," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. My father nodded, giving me a quick pat on the shoulder, before returning to his laptop where he was researching summer ballet programs for Sophia. "We always knew you would," he said absently. "You're very smart." Later that same evening, Sophia received an email accepting her into a weekend masterclass with a former principal dancer from the American Ballet Theater. My parents erupted in celebration, opening a bottle of champagne, giving me a small glass as an afterthought, to celebrate both pieces of good news. They spent the rest of the night discussing the implications for Sophia's future, my MIT acceptance fading into the background. Grandpa Harold, however, took me out for steak dinner the following weekend to celebrate properly. "I am so proud of you, Jack," he said, his eyes misty. "This is just the beginning for you." He insisted on taking photos of me holding the acceptance letter and called the waiter over to announce my achievement to nearby tables. It was the celebration I had craved from my parents. When September came, my parents helped me move into my dormitory, but the process felt rushed. They had scheduled their trip to ensure they would be back in time for Sophia's first day back at her prestigious ballet academy. As they hugged me goodbye, my mother seemed distracted, already mentally preparing for Sophia's upcoming year. "Call us if you need anything," she said, checking her watch. "We know you'll do great." My roommate Ethan watched my parents leave, then gave me a curious look. "They seem in a hurry," he commented. "They always are," I replied, arranging my books on the shelf. Ethan became my first true friend at MIT. He came from a close-knit family in Minnesota, with parents who called him twice a week and sent care packages monthly. The contrast between our family dynamics became increasingly apparent as the semester progressed. When Parents' Weekend arrived in October, my parents called to explain they couldn't make it because Sophia had an important rehearsal. Ethan's parents insisted I join them for dinner, treating me as if I were their second son. Mrs. Wilson asked detailed questions about my classes and seemed genuinely interested in my answers. Mr. Wilson shared stories from his own college days and offered connections for summer internships. Their warmth made my parents' absence simultaneously more bearable and more painful. As my first year progressed, I found myself calling home less frequently. Each conversation followed the same pattern: brief questions about my studies, followed by extensive updates about Sophia's latest achievements in ballet. I began to feel like a distant acquaintance rather than a son. My sophomore year, I joined a competitive programming team and helped develop an application that won the university's Innovation Award. When I called my parents to share the news, my father answered, sounding distracted. "That's great, son," he said after my excited explanation. "Listen, can I call you back? We're just heading out the door to watch Sophia perform. She's been selected for a special showcase." He never called back. By junior year, I had become accustomed to the emotional distance. I immersed myself in my studies and coding projects, finding purpose and community among fellow tech enthusiasts. I rarely went home for holidays, claiming academic commitments that were often partially true. When I did visit, I felt like a guest in my childhood home, where conversations revolved around Sophia's progressing ballet career and the competitions she was winning. The turning point came during the spring semester of my junior year, when I developed an algorithm that caught the attention of several major tech companies. My professor encouraged me to publish a paper and present at a prestigious conference. It was the kind of achievement that could launch a career, and despite my learned self-reliance, I yearned for my parents to recognize this milestone. I called home, actually excited to share my news. Mom answered, and I carefully explained the significance of what I had accomplished, trying to translate the technical aspects into terms she would understand. "That sounds impressive," she said, and for a moment I felt a spark of the connection I craved. Then her voice brightened. "Oh, before I forget to tell you, Sophia has been invited to audition for the School of American Ballet. It's incredibly competitive. Only 30 students get accepted each year." The rest of the call was dedicated to Sophia's audition preparation, my achievement forgotten. I hung up feeling hollow, a familiar sensation that had deepened with each year away at college. Ethan found me staring blankly at my computer screen afterward. "Everything okay?" he asked. "My sister might get into a prestigious ballet school," I said with a wry smile. Apparently that's the only news worth discussing in my family. Ethan's parents came to watch my conference presentation, sitting proudly in the audience next to my professor. They took me to dinner afterward, Mrs. Wilson insisting on photos to commemorate the occasion. "Your parents don't know what they're missing," she said kindly, sensing my unspoken disappointment. I nodded, the truth of her words settling heavily in my chest. Senior year arrived with a flurry of opportunities. My algorithm had attracted attention from Silicon Valley, and I had job offers from 3 top tech companies before winter break. Google, Microsoft, and a promising startup were all competing for my talents, offering packages that made my classmates envious. My academic advisor called me one of MIT's most promising graduates that year. Despite these professional validations, a part of me still hungered for my parents' recognition. As graduation approached, I allowed myself to hope that this milestone would finally be the one to bring my family together. Surely my parents would prioritize watching their son graduate from one of the most prestigious technical institutions in the world. I envisioned them sitting proudly in the audience, perhaps finally understanding the magnitude of what I had accomplished largely without their support. I called home in April to discuss graduation plans. The ceremony would be held on May 20th, and I wanted to make sure they marked their calendars early. "That's wonderful, Jack," my mother said when I mentioned the date. "We'll need to check our schedule, but I'm sure we'll make it work." There was a hesitation in her voice that I chose to ignore. 3 weeks before graduation, I called again to confirm their travel arrangements. Mom answered, and I could immediately sense her discomfort. "Jack, honey, we need to talk about graduation," she began, her voice carrying that particular tone I had come to recognize over the years. It was the same tone she used when explaining why they couldn't attend my high school robotics championship. "What about it?" I asked, though I already felt my stomach knotting with anticipation. "It's Sophia," she said predictably. "She has her final recital for the School of American Ballet on the same day. It's crucial for her future placement. All the important directors will be there, and it could determine her entire career trajectory." I gripped my phone tighter, blood pounding in my ears. "Mom, this is my college graduation from MIT. I'm only going to graduate once." "I know, sweetie, and we're so proud of you. But Sophia really needs our support right now. This audition could make or break her future in ballet." "And my graduation doesn't matter for my future?" I asked, my voice rising, despite my effort to remain calm. "That's not what I'm saying. You know we're proud of you, Jack. But you've always been so independent and successful on your own. Sophia's career is more fragile. One bad performance could close doors forever. So once again, I'm being punished for being self-sufficient," I said bitterly. "Because I've learned to succeed without you, I don't deserve your support?" The conversation continued in circles. My father got on the phone, using his professor's voice of reason to explain how they had to make difficult choices, and how Sophia's recital was a time-sensitive opportunity, while my success was already assured. The subtext was clear. My sister's dreams were more important than mine, as they had always been. After hanging up, I called Grandpa Harold, my voice shaking as I relayed the conversation. "Those fools," he muttered, and I could hear the disappointment and anger in his voice. "Don't worry, Jack. I'll be there." Wild horses couldn't keep me away from seeing my grandson graduate from MIT. His words were a balm to my wounded spirit. At least someone in my family valued my achievements. 2 days before graduation, Disaster struck. Grandpa Harold called from the hospital. He had suffered a minor heart attack while packing for his trip to Cambridge. "I'm so sorry, Jack," he said, his voice weak but determined. "The doctors won't let me travel, but I'll be with you in spirit, and I need you to know how incredibly proud I am of everything you've accomplished." I assured him that his health was more important than his attendance, but after hanging up, I sat on the edge of my bed and allowed myself to face the reality. I would be completely alone at graduation. Graduation day arrived sunny and warm. I put on my cap and gown, pinned the special honors cords to my shoulders, and looked at myself in the mirror. Despite everything, I had done it. I had graduated at the top of my class from MIT, with multiple job offers and a bright future ahead. I tried to focus on that achievement rather than the emptiness in my chest. Walking across the stage to receive my diploma was surreal. As my name was called, I heard Ethan's family cheering from the audience. They had saved a seat for Grandpa Harold, holding a sign with my name on it. I smiled and waved in their direction, but as I looked out across the sea of faces, the absence of my parents felt like a physical wound. After the ceremony, Ethan's parents hugged me tightly. "We are so proud of you, Jack," Mrs. Wilson said, wiping away tears. "You have such a bright future ahead." I joined my friends for the post-graduation celebration, forcing smiles and accepting congratulations. I laughed at jokes, posed for photos, and pretended everything was fine. But as the evening wore on, the weight of my parents' absence became increasingly difficult to bear. Back in my apartment later that night, I finally allowed the facade to crumble. I sat on the floor of my nearly packed apartment, surrounded by cardboard boxes containing my college life, and broke down completely. Years of accumulated hurt, disappointment, and rejection poured out of me. As the tears subsided, something else emerged: clarity. I realized that nothing would ever change unless I changed it. My parents would continue to prioritize Sophia at every turn, and I would continue to be an afterthought in their lives. The pattern was too deeply established to be broken from within. That night, I made a decision that would alter the course of my family relationships for years to come. I would stop seeking approval I would never receive. I would build a life without my parents' involvement. It wasn't a dramatic declaration or an ultimatum. It was a quiet internal severance of expectation. I sent a brief text to my parents. Graduated today. Moving to California next week for my new job. Their response came hours later. Congratulations. Sophia's recital went wonderfully. The director of the National Ballet was impressed. It was the final confirmation I needed. I was done. The California sunshine greeted me as I stepped off the plane at San Francisco International Airport, a world away from Boston and the family that had consistently pushed me to the periphery of their lives. I had accepted the offer from the startup, drawn by both the innovative work they were doing and their location 3,000 miles from my past. My new apartment in Mountain View was small but modern, with large windows that let in plenty of natural light. I furnished it sparingly at first, buying only what I needed. There was something cathartic about the emptiness, a blank canvas waiting for me to create a new life. The startup culture was exactly what I needed. I was surrounded by people who understood and valued my skills, who celebrated technical achievements and innovative thinking. For the first time, I felt completely seen for what I could contribute. My algorithm became the backbone of our main product, and within 6 months, I was promoted to lead developer. My parents called occasionally during those first few months. I kept the conversations brief and impersonal, answering their questions about my job and apartment with minimal details. I deflected their half-hearted suggestions about visiting. When they spoke about Sophia's progress at the ballet school, I made appropriate noises of interest without engaging deeply. "You seem different," my mother commented during one call. "More distant." "I'm just busy," I replied, a convenient truth that masked the deeper reality. I was building walls, brick by brick, between myself and the pain they had caused. They didn't seem to grasp the depth of the rift I was creating. Perhaps they had grown so accustomed to my emotional self-sufficiency that my withdrawal registered as merely a new phase of independence. Their obliviousness only reinforced my decision to detach. Sophia reached out more perceptively. "Mom and Dad don't get it, do they?" she texted one night, after I had cut short another call with our parents. "Get what?" I replied, feigning ignorance. "That they hurt you. That missing your graduation was the last straw." I stared at her message, surprised by her insight. Sophia and I had always understood each other, despite the imbalance in our parents' attention. "It's complicated," I finally responded. "I told them to go to your graduation," she wrote back. "I said my recital wasn't as important. I'm sorry they didn't listen." Her message brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "It's not your fault," I assured her. "I'm proud of your success." And I was, despite everything. My issues were with my parents' choices, not with Sophia's dedication to her art. We maintained sporadic contact after that, more honest than my interactions with our parents. She understood my need for distance without taking it personally. Meanwhile, I was building connections that would become my chosen family. At work, I formed a close friendship with Adrian, another developer who shared my dry humor and passion for elegant code. Through him, I met Lisa, a graphic designer, and Derek, a marketing specialist. We began gathering for weekly game nights that evolved into deep friendships. 18 months into my California life, Grandpa Harold's health took a turn for the worse. The call came from my father on a Tuesday morning. "Your grandfather doesn't have much time left," he said, his voice uncharacteristically fragile. "He's asking for you." I flew to Boston the next day. The hospital room was filled with the sterile smell of disinfectant and the rhythmic beeping of monitors. Grandpa Harold looked small in the hospital bed, his once robust frame diminished by illness and age. His eyes brightened when he saw me. "There's my MIT graduate," he said, his voice weak but proud. I spent hours by his bedside, updating him on my life in California, my work at the startup, and the friends I had made. He listened intently, occasionally squeezing my hand when his energy was too low for words. My parents and Sophia hovered at the edges of these conversations, witnessing the deep bond that had formed in their absence. I maintained polite but distant interactions with them, focusing my energy on Grandpa Harold. He passed away peacefully 3 days later, with all of us gathered around his bed. At the funeral, I delivered a eulogy that celebrated his unwavering support and belief in me. "He saw potential in people," I said, my voice steady despite my grief, "and he nurtured that potential with consistency and love." I felt my parents' eyes on me as I spoke, perhaps recognizing the implicit criticism in my words. After the service, I returned to California as quickly as possible, brushing off suggestions of extending my stay. Back in Mountain View, grief hit me in unexpected waves. Grandpa Harold had been my anchor to family, the one person who had consistently shown up for me. With him gone, my disconnection from my parents felt both more justified and more final. Around this time, I met Rachel at a tech conference in San Jose. She was presenting research on artificial intelligence ethics, her passion for the subject evident in every word she spoke. I approached her afterward with questions, and our conversation continued over coffee, then dinner, then months of dating that evolved into the most significant relationship of my life. Rachel had an intuitive understanding of family dynamics, having navigated complex relationships with her own parents following their divorce. When I eventually shared the full story of my estrangement, she listened without judgment. "Family is complicated," she said, her hand warm in mine. "Sometimes the healthiest thing is to create distance." With her encouragement, I started therapy to address the years of feeling secondary and the complex emotions surrounding my family estrangement. My therapist helped me understand that my withdrawal wasn't just about punishment, it was about self-preservation. I was protecting myself from a pattern of hurt that had shaped my entire life. As the years passed, my startup was acquired by a larger tech company, providing me with financial security and new professional challenges. Rachel moved in with me, and we adopted a golden retriever named Edison. I had built a life filled with purpose, love, and genuine connection, a life where I was valued for exactly who I was. My interactions with my parents remained minimal and superficial. They had seemingly accepted our new dynamic, though they occasionally made comments about wishing we were closer. Sophia had joined a dance company in New York, and was building her own independent life. We texted regularly and occasionally video called, maintaining a relationship separate from our parents. By all external measures, I was thriving, but the approaching 5-year mark of my graduation and my decision to emotionally separate from my parents brought unexpected reflections. I had healed significantly, but there remained an unaddressed wound at the core of our family. I had never explicitly told my parents why I had pulled away, and they had never truly acknowledged the pattern that had led to our estrangement. It might have continued this way indefinitely, this careful dance of distance, if not for the cream-colored envelope that arrived in my mailbox in early spring. The envelope sat on my kitchen counter for 3 days before I finally opened it. The elegant script on the front read Jack Thompson, with my address neatly printed below. I knew what it was before breaking the seal. My cousin Alexander was getting married. Rachel had noticed my reluctance to open it. "It's not going to disappear if you keep ignoring it," she said gently on the 3rd evening, sliding a glass of wine toward me. With a sigh, I tore open the envelope. The invitation was tasteful and traditional. Alexander Bennett and Megan Foster requested the pleasure of my company at their wedding in Boston, 2 months from now. I stared at the RSVP card, my stomach nodding as I considered the implications. "Your family will be there," Rachel said. Not a question but a statement. "All of them," I confirmed. "It's Alex's wedding. He's my father's nephew. Everyone will expect the whole family to attend." It had been nearly 5 years since I had been in the same room as my parents for more than the brief, tense hours of Grandpa Harold's funeral. 5 years of carefully constructed distance, of healing and building a life where their absence didn't ache quite so sharply. The thought of dismantling those protective walls, even temporarily, made my chest tighten with anxiety. That night, I lay awake beside Rachel, turning over my options. I could decline the invitation, citing work commitments. Alexander and I weren't particularly close. He would be disappointed but would understand. But that solution felt cowardly, a perpetuation of avoidance that had served its purpose, but perhaps had run its course. The next day, I brought up the invitation during my therapy session. "What's the worst that could happen if you attend?" my therapist asked. "They could act like nothing ever happened," I replied immediately. "They could continue to be oblivious to how deeply they hurt me, or they could try to force a reconciliation I'm not ready for. And what's the best that could happen?" That question was harder to answer. "I don't know," I admitted finally. "Maybe I'd get some closure. Maybe seeing them as they are now, rather than how they exist in my memory, would help me move forward." Over the next week, I discussed the wedding with friends who had become my California family. Adrian argued for skipping it. "They don't deserve your time," he said loyally. Lisa suggested that facing them might be the final step in my healing process. Rachel listened to all these perspectives but offered a different take. "I'll go with you," she said simply. "Whatever happens, you won't face it alone." Her offer shifted something in my thinking. The thought of Rachel beside me, steady and supportive, made the prospect of the wedding less daunting. Perhaps with her at my side, I could navigate this family reunion on my own terms. I called Alexander to confirm my attendance, adding Rachel's name to the RSVP. "I'm looking forward to meeting your family," he said, and I could hear the genuine pleasure in his voice. "Aunt Diana mentions you all the time. They'll be so happy you're coming." His comment stayed with me. My mother talked about me? What did she say? Did my parents actually miss me? Or just the idea of having a successful son they could mention in academic circles? As the wedding date approached, my anxiety manifested physically. I had trouble sleeping, my appetite decreased, and I found myself checking my phone more frequently, half expecting messages from my parents. Rachel noticed my restlessness and suggested we prepare thoroughly for the trip. "Let's get everything ready well in advance," she said pragmatically. "The right clothes, the gift, the hotel and rental car. Controlling what we can might help with the things we can't control." Shopping for a suit triggered unexpected emotions. Grandpa Harold had always helped me dress for formal occasions, adjusting my tie with careful hands and telling me I looked sharp as a tack. His absence hit me anew as I stood in the fitting room. "He would be proud of you," Rachel said, somehow knowing exactly where my thoughts had wandered. "Not just of how you look, but of who you've become." We developed strategies for handling difficult conversations. Rachel suggested having exit phrases ready if discussions became too intense. We agreed on signals to give each other if either of us needed a break from family interaction. These preparations were practical but also symbolic reminders that I was no longer the powerless child or the lonely graduate. I was an adult with agency and support. The night before our flight to Boston, I nearly called the whole thing off. We were packing our suitcases when a wave of dread washed over me so intensely that I had to sit on the edge of the bed. "I don't think I can do this," I admitted, my hands shaking slightly. Rachel sat beside me, her shoulder pressed against mine. "You can," she said firmly. "But you don't have to. This is your choice, Jack. If you want to stay home, we will. But I think part of you wants to face this, to finally say what's been unsaid for 5 years." She was right. Beneath the anxiety was a current of determination. Perhaps it was time to close this chapter properly, with words instead of silence. Our flight to Boston the next morning was turbulent, an appropriate metaphor for the emotional journey ahead. As the plane descended through clouds, I looked out at the familiar skyline of my hometown. My stomach churned with a mixture of nostalgia, apprehension, and something that felt surprisingly like courage. After collecting our rental car, we drove to our hotel, deliberately chosen for its distance from my parents' home. As I unpacked my suit and hung it in the closet, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. The face that looked back at me wasn't the hurt college graduate of 5 years ago. It was a man who had built a life on his own terms, who had found love and purpose without his parents' validation. "Whatever happens tomorrow," I told my reflection, "I'll be okay." Rachel squeezed my hand. "Yes," she agreed. "You will." The wedding venue was a historic hotel in downtown Boston, its ballroom transformed with cream and navy decorations that managed to be both elegant and warm. Rachel and I arrived deliberately close to the ceremony start time, minimizing the potential for prolonged pre-ceremony interactions with my family. My heart hammered against my ribs as we approached the guest book, scanning the room for familiar faces. My cousin Jessica spotted me first. "Jack," she called, hurrying over with a genuine smile. "It's been forever. And this must be Rachel." She embraced me. Then Rachel, her enthusiasm creating a momentary buffer against my anxiety. "How's California treating you?" she asked. "Alex says you're doing amazing things with computers or software or something." Her friendly chatter gave me time to continue surveying the room. I spotted several aunts and uncles, a few family friends, and then, across the room, Sophia. My sister had matured in the years since I'd seen her last. Her dancer's posture was unmistakable, but there was a new confidence in the way she held herself, engaged in conversation with a group of relatives. As if sensing my gaze, she looked up. Our eyes met, and after a brief moment of surprise, a warm smile spread across her face. She excused herself from her conversation and made her way toward me. "Jack," she said, embracing me tightly. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "I wasn't either," I admitted. She stepped back, studying my face. "You look good. Happy." "I am," I said, and introduced Rachel, who Sophia had previously only seen through video calls. The two women greeted each other warmly. "Mom and Dad are around somewhere," Sophia said, a careful neutrality in her voice. "They know you're coming. They've been talking about it all week." Before I could respond, guests were being ushered to their seats for the ceremony. Rachel squeezed my hand as we found our place, a silent reminder of her presence and support. The ceremony itself was beautiful in its simplicity. Alexander and Megan exchanged heartfelt vows that spoke of partnership and growth. Despite my preoccupation with the impending family reunion, I found myself moved by their evident love and commitment. It was during the recessional that I finally saw them. My parents were seated several rows ahead, rising to applaud as the newlyweds made their way back down the aisle. My mother looked slightly older but still elegant, in a blue dress that complemented her silver-streaked hair. My father stood tall beside her, his academic posture unchanged by the passing years. As guests began to move toward the reception area, our paths inevitably converged. My mother saw me first, her eyes widening slightly before her face arranged itself into a smile that seemed both hopeful and uncertain. "Jack," she said, her voice catching slightly. "You came." "I did," I replied, the simplicity of the exchange belying the complexity of emotions behind it. My father stepped forward, extending his hand formally before thinking better of it and attempting an awkward half-hug that I neither fully accepted nor rejected. "It's good to see you, son," he said. "You're looking well." "This is Rachel," I said, drawing her closer to my side. "My girlfriend." My parents greeted her with the polite enthusiasm of people desperate to make a good impression. "We've heard so much about you," my mother said, though I knew this couldn't possibly be true given how little I shared about my life with them. The conversation was mercifully interrupted by the announcement that guests should make their way to their tables for dinner. I felt a flash of panic when I realized we would likely be seated together, a fear confirmed when we located our assigned table. The place cards arranged us in a family grouping: my parents, Sophia, her date Marcus, Rachel, and me. Rachel sensed my tension as we took our seats. "Remember to breathe," she whispered, her hand finding mine beneath the table. The initial conversation was carefully superficial. My father asked about my job, and I provided the bare minimum of information about my role and the company's growth. My mother inquired about our flight and the hotel, safe topics that required no emotional investment. I asked Sophia about her dance company, genuinely interested in her career despite everything. She spoke animatedly about their upcoming season and a European tour planned for the fall. Her passion was evident, reminding me of the sister I had grown up with, separate from the complications of our parents' favoritism. The speeches and toasts provided welcome breaks from the strained conversation at our table. We ate excellent food that I barely tasted, drank wine that did little to ease the knot in my stomach, and maintained the facade of a normal family gathering. It was during dessert that the carefully constructed veneer began to crack. Perhaps it was the cumulative effect of the wine, or the emotional weight of maintaining pretense, but my mother suddenly reached across the table and placed her hand on mine. "We've missed you so much, Jack," she said, an unexpected vulnerability in her voice. "It hasn't been the same without you in our lives." Something inside me shifted, a dam breaking after years of pressure. "Have you?" I asked, my voice low but intense. "Have you really missed me? Or just the idea of having a successful son you can mention to your colleagues?" The table fell silent. Sophia and Marcus exchanged glances. My father cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Of course we've missed you," he said, a defensive edge to his voice. "You're our son." "Your son," I repeated, the words tasting bitter. "Your son, whose MIT graduation you skipped for a ballet recital. Your son who learned to celebrate his achievements alone because his sister's activities always took priority." My mother's face paled. "Jack, that's not fair. We had to make difficult choices." "No," I interrupted, years of suppressed hurt fueling my words. "You made easy choices. You consistently chose Sophia's events over mine. You prioritized her talents and dreams while treating mine as afterthoughts. And when it came to the most important day of my academic life, graduating from one of the best universities in the world, you couldn't even show up." My voice had risen, attracting glances from nearby tables. Rachel placed a steadying hand on my arm, not to silence me but to remind me of where we were. My father's expression hardened. "That's a very self-centered way of looking at things. Sophia's career opportunities required certain sacrifices from all of us. Your sister needed our support in different ways than you did." "You never even asked what I needed," I said, the hurt of years breaking through. "You assumed I was fine because I didn't fall apart when you weren't there. You punished me for being resilient." Sophia suddenly spoke up, surprising everyone at the table. "He's right," she said quietly. "You did favor me. I told you to go to his graduation. I told you how important it was." My parents looked at her in shock, as if they couldn't believe their perfect daughter was siding against them. "We were trying to do what was best for both of you," my mother said, tears forming in her eyes. "Best for both of us?" I echoed in disbelief. "When was the last time you attended one of my events before I cut you out? Can you even name one of my significant achievements from college?" Their silence was answer enough. The tension at our table had become impossible to ignore. The bride's mother, sensing the brewing family drama, approached with forced cheerfulness. They're about to cut the cake. Perhaps this conversation could continue somewhere more private. Wordlessly, we rose from the table and moved toward a small anteroom off the main ballroom. Rachel whispered that she would wait outside unless I needed her, giving me the space to address my family directly. Once the door closed behind us, the pretense fell away completely. 5 years of distance collapsed into raw, unfiltered emotion. "Do you know what it felt like?" I asked, my voice shaking despite my efforts to control it. To walk across that stage and look out at the audience, knowing there wasn't a single family member there to see it? To watch other graduates being hugged by proud parents while I stood alone? Do you have any idea what that did to me? My mother was crying openly now. "We never meant to hurt you, Jack. We loved you. We still love you." "Love isn't just a feeling," I said. "It's shown through actions, through showing up, through making your child feel valued and seen." My father, always the academic, attempted to intellectualize the situation. We may have made mistakes in how we balanced our attention, but surely cutting us off completely was an extreme reaction. "It wasn't a reaction," I said, meeting his gaze directly. "It was self-preservation. I spent years trying to earn your attention and approval. I excelled at everything I did, hoping that eventually I would do something impressive enough for you to prioritize me, but nothing was ever enough." Sophia stepped closer, tears in her own eyes. "I always knew," she said quietly. "I saw how they treated us differently. I benefited from it, but I hated it too. I never wanted to be the favorite at your expense." This admission seemed to hit my parents harder than anything I had said. The reality of their favoritism, confirmed by the child they had prioritized, was impossible to deny. "We thought we were doing the right thing," my mother said, her voice small. "Sophia's path seemed more precarious, more in need of our support. You were always so capable, so independent." "I became independent because I had to," I replied. "I didn't have a choice." My father, looking suddenly older than his years, sank into a chair. "We've lost 5 years with you," he said, the academic facade finally cracking to reveal genuine regret. 5 years we can never get back." The raw pain in his voice reached something in me that anger couldn't touch. For the first time, I could see that my absence had affected them deeply, not just as a blow to their parental pride, but as a genuine loss they had felt and grieved. "I needed to build a life where I wasn't constantly seeking validation I never received," I explained, my tone softening slightly. "I needed to learn that my worth wasn't dependent on your approval." "And have you?" my mother asked. "Built that life?" I thought about my career, my friends, Rachel, the home we had created together. "Yes," I said simply, "I have." We talked for nearly an hour in that small room, while the wedding celebration continued without us. There were moments of defensive justification, of hurt accusations, of tearful apologies. It wasn't a magical reconciliation. Too much damage had been done for that. But it was perhaps the first truly honest conversation we had ever had as a family. As we prepared to rejoin the reception, my father asked hesitantly, "Where do we go from here, Jack?" I looked at my family, my tearful mother, my humbled father, my sister who had always understood more than she let on, and gave the only answer I could. "I don't know yet, but this is a start." The morning after the wedding, I woke in our hotel room feeling emotionally drained but strangely lightened, as if a weight I had carried for so long had shifted, if not completely lifted. Rachel was already awake, sitting by the window with coffee she had brewed in the room's tiny machine. "How are you feeling?" she asked, passing me a steaming cup. "Like I've run an emotional marathon," I admitted. "But maybe in a good way." We had left the wedding shortly after our family confrontation, exchanging brief goodbyes with my parents and promising to talk again soon. The rawness of our conversation had left little room for social niceties or wedding festivities. As I sipped my coffee, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Your father and I would like to meet for breakfast if you're available. Just the 4 of us." I showed the message to Rachel, who squeezed my hand supportively. "Do you want me to come with you?" I considered for a moment. "I think I need to do this part alone," I decided. "But thank you for offering." 2 hours later, I found myself sitting across from my parents in a quiet corner of a downtown cafe. Sophia had joined us, her presence a buffer and a bridge between the still fragile family dynamics. My mother looked as though she had slept poorly, her eyes slightly puffy, her normally perfect appearance showing signs of strain. My father seemed diminished somehow, his academic confidence replaced by an uncharacteristic uncertainty. "We want to apologize properly," my mother began after our orders had been placed. "What we said last night in the heat of the moment wasn't enough. We've spent the night talking about everything you said, about our family, about how we failed you." My father nodded, clearing his throat. "We got it wrong, Jack. For years, we took your success for granted while focusing our energy on Sophia's more uncertain path. We convinced ourselves we were making logical parenting choices, giving more support to the child who seemed to need it more. But we were blind to how that affected you," my mother added. "We never considered that our absence was teaching you that your achievements weren't valuable to us, that you weren't as valuable." Their words were surprisingly thoughtful, suggesting that they had indeed spent the night in serious reflection rather than defensive rationalization. "It wasn't just about the graduation," I said quietly. "That was just the final moment when I realized nothing would ever change unless I changed it." Sophia reached across the table and took my hand. "I used to try to tell them," she admitted. "After you left for college, I would point out when they were doing it again, prioritizing my events, talking more about my achievements. But I wasn't forceful enough. I was still a teenager, and part of me was afraid of losing their attention too." "We should have seen it ourselves," my father acknowledged. "We have advanced degrees, we've studied child development and family dynamics, and yet we were completely blind to the damage we were doing in our own home." The waitress arrived with our food, creating a brief pause in the conversation. When she left, my mother looked at me directly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Can you tell us about your graduation day?" she asked softly. "We've imagined it so many times, especially after realizing what our absence meant to you, but we'd like to hear about it from you." The request caught me off guard. No one had ever asked me about that day. Even Rachel knew not to probe that particular wound too deeply. I found myself describing the empty feeling as I put on my cap and gown, the hollow ache as I scanned the audience for faces that weren't there, the way Ethan's family had tried to fill the void with their kindness. "Grandpa Harold was supposed to be there," I said, the memory still painful. "But he had a heart attack 2 days before. The only person in my family who consistently showed up for me couldn't be there for the most important day." My parents exchanged a look of deep shame. "We didn't know about that," my father said. "He never told us." "He didn't want to make you feel guilty for choosing Sophia's recital," I explained. "He was protecting you, just like he always protected me." The conversation shifted to my life in California, my relationship with Rachel, my career. For the first time I could remember, my parents asked detailed questions and listened attentively to my answers. There was an awkwardness to their interest, as if they were learning how to truly engage with me for the first time, but the effort felt genuine. "We'd like to try again," my mother said as we finished our meals. "We know we can't undo the past or make up for lost time, but if you're willing to give us another chance, we want to be part of your life." I looked at their hopeful, anxious faces and felt a complex mix of emotions. The hurt child in me wanted to reject them, to make them feel the pain of exclusion they had inflicted on me. But the adult I had become recognized the courage it took to acknowledge their failures so completely. "I'm not sure what that looks like," I admitted. "I've built a life without you in it. Bringing you back in will take time and effort from all of us." "We understand," my father said. "We're not expecting immediate forgiveness or a magical reunion. We just want the opportunity to try." I set clear boundaries that morning. I explained that trust would need to be rebuilt slowly, that their interest in my life would need to be consistent rather than sporadic. I told them I wasn't ready for frequent calls or visits, but would be open to gradual steps toward reconnection. "I need to see actions, not just hear words," I said firmly. "I've had enough words and promises over the years." They accepted these terms with a humility that surprised me. We parted with tentative hugs and an agreement to try a video call in 2 weeks. Flying back to California that afternoon, I felt cautiously optimistic. They really seemed to get it this time, I told Rachel as our plane lifted above the Boston skyline. "But I'm still not sure if anything will actually change. The only way to find out is to give them the chance," she replied wisely. "But on your terms, not theirs." Over the following months, my parents made consistent efforts to honor the boundaries I had set while demonstrating their genuine interest in my life. Our bi-weekly video calls actually happened, and they listened more than they talked. My father asked thoughtful questions about my work projects, while my mother took notes about my friends' names and remembered details from previous conversations. 3 months after the wedding, they tentatively asked if they could visit California. "We'd like to see your life there," my mother explained. "We can stay in a hotel nearby, and you can decide how much time you want to spend with us." After discussing it with Rachel, I agreed. Their visit was scheduled for a long weekend in October. When they arrived, I was struck by how nervous they seemed, like visitors to a foreign country without a phrasebook. I showed them my apartment, introduced them to Edison the golden retriever, and took them to my favorite local cafe. Rachel joined us for dinner, and I watched as my parents made genuine efforts to know her, to understand the relationship that had helped heal me. "Would you be willing to show us your office tomorrow?" my father asked. "We'd like to see where you work, if that's allowed." The request touched me unexpectedly. They had never shown interest in seeing my actual workspace before. The next day, I gave them a tour of the company headquarters, introducing them to colleagues and explaining the projects I was leading. They listened attentively, asked appropriate questions, and seemed genuinely impressed by the respect my coworkers showed me. "You've built something remarkable here, Jack," my father said afterward, pride evident in his voice. "Not just your career, but your whole life. We should have been here to see it develop." "You're here now," I replied, surprising myself with the sentiment. That evening, my mother handed me a small package. Inside was a flash drive. "We had all the home videos digitized," she explained. "There are quite a few of your science fairs and robotics competitions that we recorded but never watched with you. We thought maybe you'd like to have them." It was a small gesture, but a meaningful one. They were acknowledging the past while trying to reshape our future. After they returned to Boston, our communication continued. I gradually found myself sharing more about my daily life, my challenges, my successes. They sent thoughtful messages and small gifts that showed they were paying attention to the details I shared. For Thanksgiving, Rachel and I decided to accept their invitation to Boston. The holiday was awkward at times, but overall better than I had expected. Sophia joined us, and the 4 days together helped establish a new dynamic where my achievements and updates received as much attention as hers. By the following spring, as I prepared for a significant promotion at work, I found myself wanting to share the news with them immediately rather than as an afterthought. When I called, their genuine excitement and specific questions about what the new role would entail reinforced that their efforts to change were continuing. "We're so proud of you, Jack," my mother said, the words I had longed to hear throughout my childhood finally sounding authentic rather than obligatory. The journey of reconciliation wasn't without setbacks. There were moments when old patterns threatened to emerge, times when a careless comment reopened old wounds. But the difference was that now these incidents could be addressed directly rather than suppressed and internalized. As I sit here now, video chatting with my parents about the promotion that just became official, I realize how far we've come. The relationship isn't perfect, and it never will be. The years of imbalance and hurt can't be erased, but we've built something new from the ashes of what was broken. I've learned that family comes in many forms. There's the family we're born into, the family we choose, and sometimes, if we're lucky, the family we rebuild after everything falls apart. Each requires work, honesty, and the courage to be vulnerable, even when it's terrifying. What would I tell others who have experienced similar family dynamics? That your worth isn't determined by your parents' ability to see it. That sometimes walking away is necessary for healing. That forgiveness, if it comes, should be on your terms and timeline. And that rebuilding relationships after estrangement requires consistent effort from all parties, not just good intentions. Have you ever had to cut someone out of your life for your own well-being? Did you eventually reconcile, or was the separation permanent? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you found value in my journey. Share it with someone who might need to hear that standing up for yourself isn't selfish. It's sometimes the only way to create the possibility of a healthier relationship in the future. Thank you for listening, and remember that healing isn't linear, but it is possible.